Hello everyone, it's Jesse here. Welcome to the program. Now, before we get into the actual show, I want to talk for a moment about aligner therapy. We all understand that aligners are becoming really popular in practice, and in fact, the data shows that aligner therapy is tipped to increase by about 29% over the next 6 years in Australia alone. So that really lends itself to the question as to why some practices and some dentists don't feel comfortable integrating it into their practice. And it really comes back to two key reasons. The first reason is confidence. Confidence in the sense that can I diagnose, treatment plan, and deliver great quality care? But also confidence from the point of view of, can I market this treatment? Can I have treatment accepted, through my case acceptance processes? And can I do it in such a way that it's efficiently delivered so that I can make a profit out of it? And the second reason why aligner therapy is often not integrated into a practice is because of the lab fees. The lab fees are quite high. And so I've teamed up with Jeff Hall because we really wanted to solve these two problems. Jeff Hall, many of you know, is Australia's leading educator when it comes to orthodontics. And what Jeff is going to be teaching in our Clear Aligner Excellence program is how to diagnose, treatment plan, and deliver great quality aligner therapy. And I'm going to be teaching how to integrate that into the practice. So from a marketing point of view, from a case acceptance point of view, from a workflow point of view, how do we integrate aligner therapy so it's part of our day-to-day business so that becomes a profit center for the practice? Now, what we've also done, though, is we've been able to negotiate significant discounts on lab fees, so aligner therapy becomes really inexpensive to operate in your practice. Significant discounts on lab fees, significant discounts on other things that will make aligner therapy really appealing to your patients, really appealing for your practice, and create a compelling reason to integrate it. So if this is something that you're really interested in, something you want to take your practice to the next level with, I'm going to invite you to head across to Clear Aligner Excellence or clearex.com.au, clerex.com.au/dentists. Come across to our webpage there and register your interest. And when you register your interest, you'll be registering your interest for our Clear Aligner Excellence program. Because what Jeff and I are really passionate about is helping dentists become excellent at aligner therapy. Excellent from a clinical point of view, but excellent from a point of view integrating it into your practice as well. So we look forward to working with you soon. Head across to clearex.com.au/dentists, and we look forward to talking to you then.
Welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas, and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Hello everyone, it's Jesse Green here. Welcome back to SavvyDentist.com and to the Savvy Dentist podcast. It is great to have you here. And in particular, I'd like to welcome you to our summer series where we bring you some of the very best of the Savvy Dentist podcast moments. Now, over the past 6 years, we've had the chance to interview and work with countless entrepreneurs, athletes, speakers, authors, and a heap of international experts, and really finding out what makes them tick, and in particular, how to take those lessons and apply them to your dental practice. So this episode is all about how to build a self-managing team. Having worked with hundreds of dental practices around the world, I constantly hear from the practice owner that building a team is the greatest joy, but also the single biggest headache they experience on a day-to-day basis. So irrespective of your business goals, whether it's to have a profitable practice, a scalable practice, or a valuable practice, building a team is absolutely key to your success. No one does it alone. So in this episode, I'm going to share with you a series of clips that'll help you create a self-managing team, a winning culture, and to help you get the right people in the right place in your practice. In episode 336, I shared with you my thoughts about creating a winning team culture. Now, of course, if you want to have a great team, you want to have A players, those people who are great culture fit as well as great performers. But understanding culture is really key. And the first part of culture, the integral part of culture, is really about values. And so in this episode, we spoke about aligning the team with your practice values. We also articulated how to create those values and then how to communicate those values, bringing those values to life with analogies and explanations. And ultimately, as I said, we want to make sure that we've got a group of people on our team who are aligned with our values and are a culture fit in general. So let's get into it. When we think about culture, it's really useful to think about culture through these 5 lenses. But today, I want to talk about the first lens, and that is values, because I think values is where it begins. And as I said, we've all heard the importance of values. We all get that a values-driven business improves the bottom line. We all understand that we want to have people aligned with our values. And as I said, it's not a matter of whether someone's good or bad. It's about fit and alignment. We could have someone who's a really nice person who's a C player. They don't buy into our culture, but that doesn't make them a bad person. It just means they're not the right fit for us. And we're not the right fit for them. And so when we talk about values, I think it's really important to understand how do we create values, but then how do we communicate values? Because I think that's really key, is we want to not just have this value statement on a poster that's gathering dust or something that sounds really grandiose and inspiring when we created it, but it doesn't translate into anything. So today I want to talk to you about how to create values, how to articulate your values, and then how to communicate your values with those people on your team and with your customers. So let's talk about that. So when it comes to values, oftentimes we hear words like excellence, integrity, and all those sorts of things. And those are great words. And I love those words. There's a lot of power to those words, but in and of themselves, they don't mean much. So what we need to be able to do is, as we start thinking about values, is to think of these words that might be something that we want to represent us. And some of these values might just be pay to play. They might be just assumed, like integrity, doing the right thing. That could just be assumed. It might not have to be a value. So in our business, integrity is kind of the entry point. You don't get to be on the team if you don't have integrity. So it's not one of our core values in a sense, but it is the minimum requirement before you're even allowed on the team, right? So if you don't have integrity, you're not coming through the door. So I think what you've got to be able to think about are, what are those pay to play kind of values? What are those things that are just baseline, basic human decency kind of values? And then what are the things that you and your practice want to be known for over and above that? So for us, integrity is a baseline value. We all have it, we all expect it, and if you don't have it, then you're not on the team. So we go beyond integrity is what I'm trying to say. So you're going to need to think about, what are those pay-to-play values for yourself, but what are the values that make sense for you over and above that? Now, you might be thinking of values such as innovation, you might be thinking of values as humility, you might be thinking of values as confidence, whatever it happens to mean for you. But once you've figured out those words that you mean something, we've got to think about what that word means to you, because for some people, excellence could mean just clinical work. For others, it could mean the patient experience. For others, it could mean everything. And we want to think about these values from a couple of different perspectives, how other people might experience excellence in our practice. Whether you're a patient, what does excellence mean as a patient? What does excellence mean if you're a team member? How do we live those values as a team with one another on our team? If we're the owners, how do we experience excellence? And then, of course, anyone else, other people that interact with our practice, how do they experience excellence? So we need to think about these words from a couple of different perspectives. And once we've thought about that and digested that and articulated that in ourselves, we've then got to synthesize that down into a bumper sticker or a catchphrase. And maybe for us, it could be excellence is by really understanding the detail. Excellence is in the detail, doing the little things right. That could be your definition of excellence. It might not be yours, but that could be a bumper sticker for you. So we've got to be able to think about excellence from all those different perspectives and then synthesize that down into something that is practical and usable and something that we can communicate. So we want to be able to look at those. Then, of course, what we need to be able to do is we need to be able to explain excellence, and we need to be able to explain our value to our team members. Now, in our business, we have what we call a state of the company meeting every quarter, and every quarter we are articulating our values, but we talk about our values many more times than that as well. But the reason we talk about these so much is because we want everyone to know what those values are. We want them to know what behaviors support those values, and we want them to be able to kind of not quite roll their eyes when I talk about it, but we want them to be so much part of our DNA that everyone's going, yeah, Jesse, we get it. We understand. Not just that we're hearing this for the first time, or we're not just hearing this for the first time since the last quarter. So when we communicate values, when I do my state of the company address, what I'm talking about is I'm trying to give a story around excellence. And I might say, tell a story about a sporting person because I love sports. So I might talk about Roger Federer or someone like that, or Steve Waugh, someone who's a sporting hero to me, or another example that makes sense to you. Maybe it's in the arts, maybe it's a musician, whatever it happens to be. And then I'll give an analogy. And for me, as I said, excellence is in the details, about doing those fundamental things really well, time and again. So that might be something that I would use to describe excellence because that's my bumper sticker. But then I'm going to give examples in our practice of what that looks like. Maybe it's about making sure our clinical work is, spot on. Maybe it's making sure that we do everything that we say. We follow up on all the things that we say we're going to do. Maybe it's making sure that our lab gets the best possible communication from us, whatever that means. And so then we've got to talk about the individual behaviors. If you're a team member on our team,
how do you behave in a way that exhibits excellence? So what are the behaviors that would indicate that you are embodying the value of excellence? So maybe it's things like finishing what we start, following through on what we say. Maybe it's about not rescheduling. Maybe it's about running on time. Maybe it's about quality assurance and cross-checking things to make sure that there's no errors. Maybe that's what excellence means in your practice. Maybe they're the behaviors. But then here's what I also do, and I think this is important. I talk about the anti-values. What are the behaviors that would absolutely undermine the value of excellence? What would be the behaviors that I don't want to see? Things that would really kind of grind my gears as it relates to excellence. So for me, it might be something like near enough is good enough, being a bit slapdash with things. Maybe it's about thinking that nobody will notice when they do. So I think when we start thinking about values, we've got to be able to communicate the values in a very clear, concise way. If we just had a poster that said the word excellence on it, you kind of go, yeah, that's great, but it's a bit vanilla, it's a bit nothing, it's a bit meh. So we want to use values as part of our culture creation telescope, the very first lens, but we want to bring them to life. We want to make sure that they're vivid. And we want to have a vivid vision and we want to have vivid values. And so the vivid values really is about putting them on a bumper sticker and then really bringing those values to life with a story, an analogy, some examples, the behaviors that would underpin those values. And then, of course, the anti-values, the behaviors that would undermine those values. And when we explain that and the team get that, we're now telling them, showing them about what's expected. So now we can have conversations about whether someone's a culture fit or not. Do they exhibit our values? Do they buy into our vision? Do they display the behaviors and the rituals or the habits that would underpin and support our values or not? Are they a culture fit? Do they get it? Okay. And so then once we know whether someone's a culture fit, we know whether they're an A player, a B player, a C player, or a D player. And we can then put in place a performance plan that helps them become an A player. And if you've got someone who's not a culture fit, then there's conversations to be had about that. And there's conversations that need to be had about, are you going to be able to buy into this culture or not? And if someone's not going to buy into the culture, then respectfully, with care and love, that person should not be on your team. And you probably know that because you're the one lying awake at night thinking, my God, this person isn't quite right. They're great at their role. I like them as a person, but there's just something that doesn't quite feel right. That's the person you need to have a conversation with. That's the person you need to make sure that you've articulated the behaviors, the habits, the values, the vision, and of course the stories. So we've got to make sure all of this is right. And only then can you be sure whether a culture fit or not. And only then do you know what to do with those team members? So I hope you find that helpful. I hope you find that instructional, because being values driven, having culture fit is going to be a key factor in your success in the long run. And if you get this right, you're going to have a team that's aligned. You're going to have a team that's productive. You're going to have a team that is harmonious, and you're going to get so much satisfaction and joy out of your work. And I guarantee you that if you want to have a practice where you're making money, you've got the time to enjoy the life that you want to live, and you've got personal fulfillment and satisfaction, then having a team that's aligned with culture is going to be critical to that.
Recently, I sat down with Kiera Dent from Dental A Team, and we're talking about how to create an incredible team and how much easier life and work is once you've got an incredible team. And when you've got an incredible team, that means your team members are sharing the same goal that you are. Everyone's moving in the same direction, rowing in the same direction. That, of course, means that we've got to be comfortable sharing our goals with the team, and that comes with a level of trust. And when you develop that trust and build that trust and engender that trust, you create a sense of loyalty. And this episode is all about trust and loyalty and aligning the team to your goals. You're going to love this episode. Here's Kiera.
What's happening is I found if we can get a really solid team to drive your practice for you, you can get great team buy-in. That ship moves so quickly and so easily, it looks like it's not even hard for them to be doing successfully when other offices are just struggling. And I really have found that a lot of it has to do with the team around it. So I'm glad you brought that up of, yes, of course you have greater success, but I think more than anything, work is just easier when you have this incredible team that's bought in with you. So my approach going into an office, I was a team member, and I tell people, just tell me the goals of what you want to hit, and I'm going to do it for you. Like, I love my doctor. I love our patients. I love our practice. And people didn't realize that as team members, we literally want to make our doctors' lives easier. We want to help, and we just need to know the goals. Well, working with a lot of doctors, I realized a lot of doctors are uncomfortable sharing their goals with their teams. And I'm like, guess what? Your team probably actually wants more than you do. They probably could dream bigger than you can, because they always do every time I do this activity. So what I found is some of the benefits of a team is they actually can innovate and create and think in a much broader, bigger way, because they have a different perspective than dentists do. They come with these innovative, creative ideas. My team literally today, I was like trying to be the awesome boss that was giving them all the ideas. And finally I said, hey, I trust you guys. Like, come up with whatever you decide. I know it's going to be awesome. I can't wait to see what you create. They came up with a much better idea than I ever did. And I didn't have to do anything other than empower them to just go with it and run with it. So I think we don't realize the intangible of your work that you are required to do is less when you have a really incredible team, because that team's invested, they're bought in, they're driving your practice and your organization forward in the most creative, innovative ways, which then has another benefit of that team feels fulfilled. They're happy. Those team members feel like they're contributing to a greater cause. So then you get this loyalty, this buy-in, this incredible culture, and dentists sit back and they're with their family for the 5 days. They show up maybe 1 day a week, and that team is driving in the exact direction that that culture has been created. So I think often we don't realize less stress, greater experiences for our patients and our whole team. And it all comes from just having this really core, amazing team. But again, that doesn't just happen overnight. That's not just like, I got lucky with a great team. There is quite a bit of work that I feel goes into making that incredible team.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that work that does go into that, because, sometimes we think about, I like to think about the A to Z, what's the start to finish kind of thing that we need to be thinking about. And clearly there's a lot of moving pieces in that. There's the recruitment piece, there's the onboarding training, and so on and so forth. But for those people who are listening to this podcast and going, oh, Kiera, a team that actually thinks, a team that actually is innovative, a team that has initiative and drive and cares about my goals, what stops the doctors sharing their goals? Because you touched on that, and I know many dentists, many practice owners do feel a little bit uncomfortable, and particularly around financial goals, particularly around saying, I want the practice to earn a certain amount of money, I want the profit levels to be whatever they want to be. How would you communicate that elegantly and effectively to the team for buy-in? Because the big fear that a lot of practice owners will have is, it just feels a little bit, I feel like I'm earning this much and the team's earning not as much. And is that going to create resentment? Am I going to be suddenly asked for pay rises? Yes. All of those questions come up. So how would you suggest someone starts that process by at least communicating their goals?
I'm so glad you brought this up, because this is actually what I love to do, coaching, because I feel like I understand it so well. As a team member, I actually didn't think any of those stories that dentists are telling them, though. I didn't think that they were getting this huge production number because they were trying to buy a new boat or a new house. And honestly, I don't care, because guess what? I love my job. And I worked at a dental college for 3 years. And I say, like, dentists, I want you to be successful. You put in a lot of hard work, blood, sweat, and tears. And me as a team member, if I'm the right team member, I want you to be successful, because I realize, and you guys can play this for team members if you'd like, as a team member, I actually am more secure and more safe when my dentist and the practice is profitable, because my job's not in jeopardy and the energy from my doctor actually is better. I can feel that security around me. So I tell all teams, like, you want your doctor and your practice to be insanely successful because your job's secure and you have way more opportunities to grow and help more patients. So I think, first of all, docs realize that your team's most of the time not thinking about that. And the team members who are thinking about that might not be the right team member for your practice. Totally. But I will also flip and say, as a business owner now, I get you. It's awkward to tell my team, like, hey, here are these goals, because I have those exact same questions of, does my team think this about me? Which is ironic, because as a team member, I didn't think that at all. But now as an owner, I question, does my team think that? And then I have to realize the way you start this is, guys, I look at production as a way to measure how many patients we're helping. The greater our production is, the higher our production is, the more patients we're able to help. And I'm on a really big moral mission to save patients from bad dentistry. There are a lot of practices that don't provide the best dentistry. And so I'm really big at growing the best practices and helping them serve more people in their community. So that's a great way to show that your production number actually is completely connected to how many patients you're actually able to help and serve and give back to in your community. Also, then you ask your team, like, what do they want? So I've been working, a great example is I have an office in greater New York area up by Canada's border, actually. And they have 4 locations. They're about to expand to 2 more this year. And they're amazing. They're all private practice. And we actually have started building goals within those practices individually. So I asked the teams, like, where do you see your practice in 1 year, 3 years, 10 years? Where do you actually want to be? And it's really fun because some of the teams put like, in 3 years, we want to go on a cruise. Well, I'll be honest, if we're hitting like certain revenue goals, absolutely. I would love to take my team on a cruise. But what's really fun is the team built the revenue goals. The team built what they want to do. The team built how many new patients they want to be seeing. And you help them understand math. Of course, you can help guide the team on certain things they might not know business-wise, but let the team dream with you. Let the team help create it. Because then doctors, you're not the one pushing and driving this revenue and saying, I want to have this. I say 50% overhead is what's expected of a healthy business. So you just let them know this is what's expected. That way you're secure. The way our business is secure. This is what's expected. Go from there. Sky's the limit. So then your team literally can build off of that. They know what to do. And that's, I think, one of the best ways you can start these conversations is ask the team where they see this practice growing in 1, 3, 10 years. And if they want in 10 years to have 4 locations, well, they have to realize that you need revenue to be able to do that. Then the conversation becomes very easy. And you tie that to this revenue can only be increased by us doing better care, greater value, serving more patients. That's what's going to grow our business. And that's what's going to help all of us achieve what we ultimately want of the best patient care.
Peter Economy joined me in episode 311 to discuss toxicity in the workplace. And really, we wanted to know how to identify a toxic workplace, what sort of behaviors you might see, what the impact of these behaviors are in the workplace, and of course, sometimes understanding if we're part of the problem as well. We needed to understand the relationship between culture and toxicity, but then specifically how to reverse that and how to create a more positive, productive, and collaborative environment so you've got a great culture for your team. This is a really wonderful episode, so let's hear from Peter right now. What typically might be on display in a toxic workplace? Because there'll be some people who might be thinking, what's kind of normal rough and tumble of the workplace and where does it cross into toxicity?
Yeah, well, it's a wide range of behaviors and it's not all, really bad, super bad personal behavior. I mean, someone who's consistently late can be considered toxic. They're not pulling their load. People that gossip behind people's backs, people that call in sick when they're not sick. And then there's people that are screamers. I mean, you have the, people that are really acting out. So you have people that yell, and that could be a boss. It could be anybody that yells at other people. Taking long lunch breaks. I mean, some of these things seem kind of minor, and in a way they are, because they're not those physically, violent kind of things that might be really toxic or psychologically violent. But a lot of these things are toxic behaviors because they have an impact on the team. They have an impact on the coworkers, and they become negative to the workplace and negative to productivity and everything else.
Let's talk about the effects of that toxicity, because I would imagine that if you have a toxic workplace, you're going to find it hard to hang on to your good people. You're going to have obviously productivity issues. And some of those issues probably come from the top down as well. And so obviously, the article that you wrote, how to get rid of these 5 people or 7 ways to get rid of these 5 people. But sometimes it might be just observing yourself and going, I can't get rid of me. I'm the boss, I can't get rid of me. So maybe when we think about these behaviors, some of them don't seem so toxic when we talk about them, but we've got to understand the impact of those things and how they play out. So I know I'm covering a fair bit of territory just here, but I wanted to ask you, as we go through this, what are the impacts of a toxic workplace? How do we identify the people who might be the culprit? But equally, sometimes as leaders, we might be just as culpable as the next person. And how do we self-identify?
Yeah. So, the impacts are really pretty tremendous in many cases. So, for example, like you said, when there's a toxic workplace, people can become disengaged from their work. So, for example, I'm on a team, I've got somebody that's being toxic, I don't want to be a part of that team, I want to do something else, so I withdraw. And I'm not engaged in my work. And if you've got a bunch of people who are being impacted negatively by that toxic person, they disengage and they want to get out of there. And in some cases, it's so bad that people will look for another job. I mean, people do leave their jobs. I mean, the number one reason why people say they leave their jobs is because of a bad boss. Gallup's done surveys, and they found that the number one reason people say that they leave their job is because of a bad boss. So bad bosses are often the most toxic people in the workplace. And if you're the boss and you're a toxic boss, how do you do that? And I think the best bosses, the best leaders, well, everybody's different. We all have our own personalities, but the best leaders identify that they've got shortcomings, that they are maybe toxic in some way. Maybe they do scream a little bit, they get short with people, but they identify that and they do something about it. They don't just go on and then have people quit. And you don't want great people to quit. You want to keep your good people. You want to attract other good people. You don't want your organization to get the reputation that that's a place where people shouldn't go to work. I mean, one of the most effective and the least expensive ways to recruit new employees is through your current employees. They're the ones who will recommend their friends, their colleagues, their relatives, whoever it might be, to you. They're going to say, you ought to interview my cousin Jim, for example, because he's a great accountant. He'd be super for this company. But guess what? If you've got a toxic workplace, if you're a bad boss, a toxic boss, then that person's not going to recommend good people to you. So not only do you lose good people don't come to you. They're not attracted to your organization.
If we come to the realization that we do have some toxicity in the workplace, whether it's from other people or from ourselves, obviously the question then is, we need to change. And that kind of comes back to workplace culture somewhat. So is there a relationship between toxicity and culture? And then, of course, how do we go about creating a more positive culture, a more inclusive, a more supportive culture by design rather than letting things just metamorphose as they will?
Yeah. Well, I think there's and I know that this was the case in a company I used to work for, that when you've got high performers, sometimes those high performers are toxic. And then we tolerate them. A business owner will tend to tolerate them. An executive, a CEO, whoever it might be, will tend to tolerate that person. So let's say, for example, your VP of sales, you've got a salesperson who's the most amazing salesperson in the world. But boy, they get people upset. They just get people really upset. And there's a culture. You create the culture by tolerating that kind of behavior. When you tolerate that behavior, you're creating a culture that says, if you're a great performer, then you can be a total jerk. That's fine. We're good with that. And that's the culture you're creating. And there's an old saying, a friend of mine, Bob Nelson, used to promote, you get what you reward. And if you reward bad behavior, you're going to get more of that. So guess what? Other people will say, well, geez, maybe I could act like that person too. Because why not? It might get me something might make me feel better for whatever reason. So you're creating a culture that tolerates that. And that's the kind of culture most of us don't want to work in. And if you're a business owner, that's not the kind of culture that you want to promote. You want to create a culture where people feel that they feel good for going to work, that they want to go to work. There's more statistics about this there's millions of dollars lost every year to employees who just say, I'm going to call in sick today because I don't want to deal with that jerk, that works next to me. I don't want to do it today. I'm calling in sick. And there's, in the United States here, it's hundreds of millions of dollars lost every year. So it's a big number, most any place. So create a culture of the kind of culture you'd want to work in.
This episode of the Savvy Dentist podcast is proudly brought to you by Clear Aligner Excellence. Market data shows that over the next 6 years, the clear aligner market in Australia will grow by a whopping 29%. That's a huge uplift in aligners, and what we know is there's an opportunity for dental practices to be able to capitalize on that trend. Clear Aligner Excellence is a business that has been designed to help dental practices capitalize on that by helping install proven turnkey systems. These systems are designed to maximize clinical efficiency and outcomes, to accelerate and increase the number of new patient starts, and of course to reduce the overhead of the practice and to increase profits. If this is something that you'd like to take advantage of in your practice, all you need to do is head across to clearex, clearex.com.au/dentists and register your interest. We all know that culture is everything as we go about creating a team, but what we really also need to think about what our role as leader can be to create that positive culture. That means looking at ourselves in entirety, acknowledging our personal lives, acknowledging our business lives, and bringing that all together. And Tristan White shares some really great practical tips, tricks, and strategies to help you understand your role and how to shape your role as the culture champion in your practice. So let's get into it.
So if we want to create a thriving culture where there is that energy, and again, you can feel it, and we've all, as much as we've probably experienced the negative type of vibe, we've also felt the good vibe. Most of us would have experienced that.
Yep.
And so if we want to create that, and we're thinking, okay, I would love to work in a place like that, but I would also love to be the person that helps create that. What are some of those steps that you spoke about? There's those 4 sections, and then of course, the 19 pieces underneath that. So could you just walk us through 1 or 2 keystone pieces of that so we can really get an understanding?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with the fourth of the 4 parts of the culture is everything system, which is where the quick wins often happen. I think it's important to build some momentum sometimes.
Yeah.
And so the culture is everything system is what I've discovered. There are 4 parts to it. And one part of it is some people, when I say this, some people say, oh, not that stuff again. And other people will be like, yes, tell me the detail of this because I want to know about this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And so the fourth part is show more love. It's quite simply show more love. And I learned this the hard way, Jesse, because I had a team at the Physio Co that were good people, were doing good work, but they weren't doing as great a work as I thought their potential was. And I think many of business owner and team leaders have been in that situation. And it turns out that I hadn't told them that I thought they were doing good work, but that it'd be better if they did great work. And I'd asked them, what's going on? Well, how can I help you and support you and recognize you for the work you're doing? So some of the parts of show more love, which is really important, is regular recognition from the CEO or the business owner. And I'm not talking about great work on making great sales or you turned up on time sort of stuff. Yeah, you can notice that sort of stuff if you like. But how about recognition that says, I really noticed how you connected with that client, or I really noticed how you really did give your full self and worked harder as a person to really connect with our clients or our teammates. And I noticed that and I really appreciate it. It lives our core value of respect everyone. And I really appreciate what you're doing there. And that sort of recognition from business owners or the CEO is really powerful sort of stuff, Jesse. So that's one example in show more love. Another one is that bad stuff happens, Jesse, in our lives, whether we like it or not. And I'm not talking about it only at work, making a mistake at work. Mistakes at work happen. We understand that. But bad stuff happens in people's personal lives as well. And I think it's so important that we are connected to our team members to firstly, damn well know that something's not quite going right in their personal life, and then give them the time and space and maybe send a gift if it's appropriate, or just let them know, you know what, we heard something went wrong, a parent or grandparent passed away or something didn't quite go right. And let's just acknowledge it and give people the space to deal with their personal lives so they can also get on with their professional lives as well. That's another part of show more love, Jesse. And the last one I'll just capture is that if you're going to build a strong team and a business that does great work over a long period of time, do not ever forget to capture the memories. And I think it's important. I think it's important that we create a culture book or a yearbook or a slideshow or something that captures what we did in the year of 2021, so that we can look back on 2021 and then we can replicate it in 2022, and we can it's a bit like a school yearbook. It's a bit like some sort of documenting what happened in your team that year. I think it's really powerful for building a strong team culture.
I think that's fantastic. I've never heard that idea in terms of a yearbook for the business. I think it's a wonderful idea. And I guess it's also really nice to be able to reflect on the progress that you make as well, because oftentimes people are achieving lots of things, doing some wonderful work, but in the day-to-day busyness, we forget about it. And so it is nice to also celebrate those wins, as you say, so we can go, you know what, we have actually gotten through a hell of a lot of stuff.
Have you ever sat through a really bad meeting? I have sat through countless bad meetings, particularly when I was in the Navy as a dentist. The meetings droned on for hours and hours and hours. Now, my guest, Mamie Kanfer Stewart, in episode 298, spoke about how to make your meetings count, how to run great meetings, productive meetings, meetings that were focused on outcomes. So in this episode, she identifies the key problems that undermine the effectiveness of meetings and specifically how to address them. It's a really practical episode. Again, you're going to want to have a pen and paper handy because Mamie shares some real pearls that are going to take your meetings to the next level, enhance your team communication, and really use those meetings to drive growth of the practice. So here she is.
One of the other problems that I see a lot that comes up with meetings, and I've certainly been guilty of it too, so two hands in the air for me, but meetings where the business leader or the business owner kind of dominates the airspace, and it can feel like, if you're a team member, that you're being spoken at or to, and it's not a conversation. Again, is that something that you see commonly as well?
It is. And I'll first say that the way that I discovered this practice was actually in a very similar way to being in my family business and then coming out into other spaces, where I observed that in meetings, my dad was almost always the last to talk, because whatever it was that he said was going to be the thing that went. Even though we have a culture in our company that, everyone's voice matters. We really value disagreement and constructive conflict. We really believe in all of that. But still, whenever you have hierarchy, you're going to have power differentials. And especially when you have a founder, that person's voice is going to be seen as more valuable and more important, even if they don't want it to be. So recognizing that is critical. Someone once described it to me as, imagine as the CEO, everything you say, you're standing on a table looking down at your colleagues. So that experience of looking up and hearing your boss say something to you, especially the founder, who's the most important person here, this company is their baby. Everything that you're saying is as if they're your parent, or they're a giant looking down on you as this little person who's just there. So getting that kind of mental image into your head is kind of the first place to start, which is your voice. Even if you say a million times, my voice is no more important than anyone else's, my opinion is no more important than everyone else's, I really want this to be collaborative, people are going to hear you differently. They're going to see you differently because of your role. The second part of it, though, is that speaking last is really important, right? I saw my dad do this. I see my sister do it in meetings now. Giving space and allowing other people to speak first and making that part of your practice. So everyone just starts to know that you're not going to talk first, which is our instinct often because we want to jump right in. So holding back and giving space for everyone to talk first. And at the end, summing up, what did you hear? And then what's your opinion? Then where are you at? After kind of listening to everyone, kind of reflecting it back and then saying, and now this is what I'm going to add to it. And many times you'll find that most of your colleagues will say things that you were already thinking. And so instead of you having to take credit for that, you can give them credit, which makes them feel really good and want to share more. And for the people that you disagree with, you're giving them a sense of respect by showing that you heard what they said, but you have a different interpretation, or you have a different perspective, or here's your reasoning why you're not going to go in that direction.
And this is the constructive disagreement. And I think the key word there is the constructive part as well. So I really, really appreciate that. And I think on that note, where you've got the founder or the leader of the business, in your case, your father, and now your sister speaking last and drawing out from the rest of the team, oftentimes there's a wallflower somewhere in there, maybe introverted, or maybe they don't feel like their opinion matters, etc. And of course, we try and encourage them out and ask them directly about what's on their mind and what views they might have around this. Is there anything else that the people running the meeting can do to try and encourage that person to speak rather than just directly asking them? Is there more to drawing them out than that?
Absolutely. I mean, facilitation is a skill set. So it doesn't all come natural to everyone to be able to create that kind of environment where everyone feels safe, to facilitate people, to draw things out of them, to know what kind of activities to use. Like, there's a whole field of meeting facilitation for a reason, because it's not easy. And it's doubly not easy when you're trying to keep everyone on time, follow an agenda, like go through all of those different roles that you have to play, take notes, right? All of those things. So the first thing I would say is, if there's someone on your team who is particularly skilled at this, or who you feel like could grow into this kind of facilitation role, to ask them to help you out. Because we don't have to be the ones to do everything. I'd say you don't have to be a meeting hero. Good meeting leaders know how to use the skill set of the people in the room. And so if there's someone else who can help draw other people out, who can ask really good questions, who can recognize and notice when someone's not talking and say, hey, no, I realize we haven't heard from Mamie at all. Maybe I'm wondering what you're thinking right now, right? Then rely on other people, encourage them and ask them to help you. The second thing is to be super clear that you value every single person's opinion and that you want them to engage, creating that sense of psychological safety and letting them know that you really do want to hear what they have to say. If people don't feel safe, they're not going to speak up no matter how many times you ask, or they'll say something, but it's not what they're really thinking, which doesn't really help us. So we need to cultivate a sense of psychological safety where people can speak up when they're asked, or they can jump in when they're ready. And they know that they are not going to be immediately shut down for their perspective, especially if it's a dissenting perspective. And then the last thing I'll say is you don't have to have it all spoken out loud. There is value to having things shared anonymously. Sometimes, especially if you feel like you're already in a position where you're working at a deficit, where people don't speak up or they're too nervous, and when you do ask them a question, they don't seem to really tell you the whole truth. Using different kinds of tools, either before the meeting or during the meeting, can help get all of that information on the page. So whether it's a Google document or some other kind of anonymous document where people can go in and no one will know who typed what, it could be polling. There are plenty of new polling tools, whether it's through Zoom or other kinds of tools, or we're all working virtually. But getting people to share their ideas anonymously is a great way to get information into the room, get perspectives into the room, that now you can have a conversation. And it doesn't matter who said what, because the information's there, and so you can all process it together.
In episode 256, I spoke about the 5 lenses of culture creation. Now, I've given you a clue what the first one is already. That's values, which we spoke about at the top of this podcast. But in this episode, we unpack the other 4 lenses and how we need to get all 5 lenses lined up and working effectively to make sure our culture is on point. Because we know that if we don't get people aligned with the culture and the people are out of sync, it really impacts performance. It impacts performance on the productivity within the business, but it also impacts performance in terms of retention of our key team members. If we tolerate poor fits, we tend to lose good people. So this episode is all about understanding the 5 lenses of culture creation and how to apply that in your practice.
So let's start with culture alignment. And the metaphor that we're using for culture is that culture is created by looking at your practice through a series of lenses. It's a bit like Pirates of the Caribbean, you know, the telescope that extends out. It's different lenses stacked one across the other. And of course, as you extend that telescope out, you can also look at it through as a cross section, so it'll look like, you know, concentric circles. But the first lens is really understanding the values of the business. And values are really our internal operating system. We can create values with a specific intent, but I guarantee you every single one of us has a set of values that we're living by, and the way you can tell is about where you focus your time and where you focus your energy. But you can consciously create values so you can choose where to focus your time and where to focus your energy. The second lens is understanding the vision of the practice. Where do we want to get to? What is it that we're trying to create here, guys? It's a bit like starting with a blank canvas and not having any idea of what it is we're painting. You've got to have your picture in your mind's eye. It's not like Monet turned up to a blank canvas and said, stuff it, I might just paint a pond today and do it from memory, right? He had a picture to work from in his mind's eye because he didn't have such good eyesight, but he had a clear picture in his mind's eye. And what we really need from the vision perspective is we need to be able to have clarity of vision. We need to have technicolor descriptions. We need to know what that really means. Because I guarantee if you don't know where you're going, you'll absolutely get there. Yeah? The third lens of the culture creation telescope is around stories. And many of you have heard me talk about the All Blacks as probably the most successful sporting team. And Barry Young gave me a book called Legacy by a guy called James Kerr, which outlines the story of the All Blacks culture. And it's a tremendous book, and I'd encourage everyone to get hold of it. But one of the things the All Blacks discovered is they had a multi-racial, multi-ethnicity team. And so what happened is when you had Caucasians and Maoris and Polynesians all coming together under the All Blacks jersey, it was difficult for them to relate to one another at first. And even though the All Blacks are now regarded as the most successful sporting team, back in the 90s there was a period where they were down and out. They'd been to South Africa, they'd had their backside handed to them by the South Africans, and South Africans came back from a night out to find the All Blacks passed out in the garden, and some of the South Africans had to literally put them in the recovery position and get help. And that was probably the rock bottom moment. But since then, they've turned their franchise, their team, into a cultural powerhouse. And part of what they did was to tell stories, to connect with one another. It was about the Polynesians sharing cultural stories, about the Maori sharing their cultural stories, about the Caucasians sharing their stories too. And it was about understanding one another. Stories are powerful. It's no secret that history is handed down through stories. The fourth lens is rituals. What are the things that we do on a day-to-day basis? And again, using the All Blacks as an example, because it's an obvious example, is the haka. And again, there was a time when they thought about discarding the haka, partly because the non-Maori members of the All Blacks didn't really connect with it. But now, I can't imagine ever seeing an All Blacks team not do the haka. It's part of their DNA now. So what are the rituals that we're going to be instilling into your practice that allow you to celebrate and create the reality of what your mind's eye is looking to create? And then lastly, it's about behaviors. What are the actions and activities we do on a day-by-day basis? What are the things that we consciously do? What are the things that we subconsciously do? And do they support our culture? And again, one of the behaviors, if we're looking at a sporting example, is how do we turn up for training? Do we turn up punctually? Do we turn up ready to go? How do we walk through the door? How do we do our morning huddle? Are we standing? Are we energetic? Are we on point? Or are we slouched? Are we low energy? And are we feeling a little bit like Eeyore? Those behaviors make a difference. Do they support the culture or do they undermine the culture? And again, it's about creating a culture with a specific intention. Yeah? So if we look at these lenses just for a moment, you'll see that the first two lenses really give clarity. Who are we and where are we going? The last two lenses really relate to how do we bring that to life on a day-by-day basis. And then, of course, the stories relate to connection. So when it comes to culture, there's a couple of challenges. The challenge when it comes to culture is we know that it's there, but no one understands it. It's not articulated. It's the vibe, but no one's really put words to it, and therefore we can't communicate it. Equally, we have ongoing misalignment, which can occur if we never take the time to articulate it, or we don't take the time to address things when they are out of alignment. It's a bit like, with kids, if they're behaving in a certain way, certainly, in our house, that sometimes happens, and you've got to be able to address that. And so equally in the workplace, we need to be able to address things when they're not quite working. And of course, if we don't get this right, we can have everyone going in different directions. It feels like, going back to the rowing analogy, you've got people out of sync. And when you've got people out of sync in a rowing boat, the boat flops around like that. And when it flops around like that, it goes slow. It sits slow in the water and it goes slow. I know Barry with his dragon boating, it would be a similar sort of thing. When you get everyone in unison, the boat comes up out of the water and you get across the water faster. It's the same thing. So if the team's not united, you slow down, it becomes frustrating and a bit agonizing, candidly. And ultimately, it feels like a job. We become robots. We become Wall-E, who just turns up to work and becomes a bit of a cyborg and just goes through the motions. Yeah? And what we want is we want hearts and minds. We don't want robots. We're in a business where people are coming to see us. There's, often a lot of anxiety. People generally don't come to the dentist for recreation. Said no one ever. So we need hearts and minds. We don't want people to be just turning into robots and going through the motions.
We really hope you enjoyed this episode of our summer series. Be sure to stay tuned for more best of moments and to learn from the wisdom of our many incredible guests. We drop our podcast episodes weekly into our Facebook group, so be sure to join if you want to stay up to date with our latest resources, announcements, and content. You can join our free Facebook group at Savvy Dentist on Facebook. Just search it there, and we look forward to seeing you in the group.